7 people in that room. £12 million on the table. And what N'Golo Kanté did next was something no one could have predicted. The boardroom was silent. Late afternoon light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. The contract sat there, pristine white pages spread across dark wood, an expensive fountain pen positioned precisely beside it. All Kanté had to do was sign. The club director, a man in a £5,000 suit who negotiated £100 million deals without breaking a sweat, leaned forward with a practiced smile. "N'Golo, this is an extraordinary offer. £12 million over 3 years, plus performance bonuses. The signing bonus alone is more than most players earn in a season." Kanté's eyes stayed on the contract. He didn't reach for the pen. His hands remained folded on the table, fingers interlaced, completely still. "We're talking about doubling your current wages," the director continued, his tone warm but edged with confusion. "You'd be one of the highest-paid midfielders in the Premier League. Your family would be set for life." Still, Kanté said nothing. The silence stretched. Became uncomfortable. The agent sitting to Kanté's left, a sharp-dressed Frenchman who'd flown in specifically for this signing, shifted in his chair. "N'Golo, perhaps we should discuss the terms privately before." "Page 7, Kanté said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clause 14. The director's smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" Kanté looked up for the first time. His expression was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes held something unshakable. "Clause 14. On page 7. I cannot sign this." Kanté didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. To understand what happened in that boardroom, you need to understand what happened 6 months earlier. N'Golo Kanté wasn't always the quiet force who won the Premier League with Leicester City, who became indispensable at Chelsea, who lifted the World Cup with France. In early 2015, he was playing for Caen in Ligue 2, French football's second tier. Decent player. Tireless worker. Nobody special. His salary was €15,000 per month. Enough to live on, enough to send money home to his mother in Paris, but nothing remotely resembling wealth. Kanté lived in a small apartment 15 minutes from the training ground. He drove a 20-year-old Renault Clio that broke down twice that winter. His teammates joked about it, offered to loan him money for a new car. He always refused with that quiet smile and said the Clio worked fine. What his teammates didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Kanté was sending €10,000 of his €15,000 monthly salary back to Paris. His mother, Madame Kanté, cleaned offices at night. 5 different buildings, 6 nights a week. She'd done it for 23 years, ever since Kanté's father died when N'Golo was 11. She'd raised him and his 4 siblings alone, working those night shifts, coming home at dawn smelling of industrial cleaner and exhaustion. When Kanté signed his first professional contract with Boulogne at 19, he made a promise to his mother. "You'll never clean another office." She'd laughed, touched his face with her work-worn hands. "N'Golo, mon fils, you need that money. Build your career first." "No," he'd said, with that quiet certainty that would become his signature. "You worked for 20 years for us. Now I work for you." For 6 years, through Boulogne, through Caen, through every contract negotiation and transfer, Kanté had maintained the same principle. Whatever he earned, the majority went to his mother first. His lifestyle second. Always. When Leicester City came calling in summer 2015, offering him a chance at the Premier League, offering wages 10 times what Caen paid, Kanté's first question wasn't about playing time or tactics or championship ambitions. It was, "Can my mother stop working?" The Leicester recruitment director had laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then he saw Kanté's face and realized it wasn't. Now, 18 months later, Kanté had won the Premier League title with Leicester in one of football's greatest miracles. He'd proven himself as arguably the best defensive midfielder in England. Big clubs were circling. Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United. And then came the offer that changed everything. Not from a club. From a brand. A sportswear company, not Nike, not Adidas, but a rising competitor trying to break into football's elite tier. Approached Kanté with a sponsorship deal that would dwarf his football salary. £12 million over 3 years to wear their boots, appear in advertisements, promote their brand. For context, Kanté's Leicester salary was £35,000 per week. Good money. Life-changing for a kid from Paris. But this sponsorship would pay him £80,000 per week just for wearing boots. The company flew executives to London. Rented this boardroom. Prepared contracts. They were confident. Kanté was perfect for their brand, humble, hardworking, the underdog who'd conquered England. His story was marketing gold. They'd done their research. They knew about his mother, about his modest lifestyle. They knew he'd appreciate financial security. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was what was written in Clause 14 on page 7. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. The boardroom remained frozen. The director stared at Kanté, trying to process what he was hearing. Clause 14 is, it's standard language. Exclusivity terms. You'd be our primary football ambassador, which means you couldn't endorse competing. Not that part, Kanté interrupted gently. The next paragraph. The community engagement requirement. The agent scrambled for his copy of the contract, flipping to page 7. His face went pale as he read. N'Golo, the agent said carefully. That clause is actually favorable. They're only requiring 12 community appearances per year. Most deals demand 20 or more. It's very reasonable. Kanté's expression didn't change. Please read what it says about those appearances. The director pulled out his reading glasses, found the clause, read aloud. Brand ambassador agrees to participate in minimum 12 community engagement events annually, including but not limited to youth clinics, charity matches, and promotional appearances at schools or community centers of the company's choosing. He looked up. That's standard, N'Golo. Good for your image, good for. Of the company's choosing. Kanté repeated. Not mine. Theirs. Silence. I don't understand the problem, the director said, frustration creeping into his voice. We'd coordinate with your schedule. Choose events that work for you. It's completely. Who decides which schools? Kanté asked. I'm sorry? If you send me to a school, who decides which school? The director glanced at his legal team. Well, our marketing department would identify opportunities that maximize brand visibility and... So you would send me to schools in wealthy areas, Kanté said. Not a question. A statement. Schools with resources. Where families can afford your products. Where photographers will take pictures of me with children who already have opportunities. The room went very quiet. You would not send me to the schools where my mother cleaned offices. Kanté continued, his voice still gentle, still calm. You would not send me to buildings where immigrant families live in 3-room apartments. You would not send me to communities where children wear the same shoes for 2 years because new ones cost too much. Away from the cameras, Kanté made a choice no one expected. The director tried to recover. N'Golo, we can absolutely discuss modifying that clause. If you want more input into which communities. Kanté was already standing. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just finished. I appreciate your offer, he said, that same quiet courtesy he'd shown to everyone from stadium janitors to club presidents. But I cannot sign a contract that tells me where I must go to help people. Every summer, I go back to rural Malmaison. To the estate where I grew up. I spend 2 weeks there. I bring footballs, boots, equipment. I play with children in the courtyard where I learned football. I do this because that is my community. Not because a marketing department tells me to. He pushed the contract gently back across the table. If your company wants to pay me to wear boots, I will wear your boots. If you want me to say they are good boots, I will say this, but only if it is true. But I will not sign paper that says you choose which children I am allowed to help. The agent was frantically trying to salvage the deal. Surely we can renegotiate that specific. No, Kanté said, and the finality in that single syllable stopped all discussion. Thank you for your time. I hope you find the right ambassador. He walked to the door. Paused. Turned back. My mother cleaned offices in buildings like this one for 23 years. Nobody ever put her in an advertisement. Nobody ever paid her £12 million. But she taught me something worth more than this contract. What's that? The director asked, genuinely curious despite his shock. That if you let other people choose your character, you no longer have one. Kanté left. The door closed softly behind him. The 7 people remaining in that boardroom sat in stunned silence. The untouched pen gleamed on the white pages. £12 million, refused in less than 10 minutes. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. The story didn't leak immediately. The sportswear company was embarrassed. A player turning down their money contradicted their entire narrative about football's mercenary culture. They buried it. But word travels in football. Always does. Within a week, 3 other boot companies contacted Kanté's agent. Within a month, he'd signed a deal with a smaller brand for significantly less money. But with a contract Kanté himself had helped write. Clause 7 of that contract specified that N'Golo Kanté would personally select every community engagement, with priority given to underprivileged areas. The brand agreed without hesitation. That summer, Kanté returned to Rueil Malmaison as promised. He spent 16 days there. No cameras. No press releases. Just N'Golo in a courtyard full of kids, playing football on cracked concrete, the same concrete where his own dreams had begun. One of those kids, a 12-year-old named Ibrahim, later told a local newspaper. He didn't come to take pictures. He came to play. For 3 hours. He didn't check his phone once. When my shoe broke, he gave me his boots. The ones from his sponsor. He said, "These are better than mine were at your age. Make them last." Ibrahim still has those boots. Never worn them again. Keeps them in a glass case his father built. The executive who'd sat across from Kanté in that boardroom eventually left the sportswear company. Years later, in an interview, he was asked about the worst negotiation of his career. "Not the worst," he corrected. "The most important. I sat across from N'Golo Kanté and watched him turn down £12 million because a legal clause didn't match his values. I'd spent 20 years in this industry thinking everyone had a price. Kanté taught me that real power isn't about money you can take. It's about money you can walk away from." Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. That contract, the one Kanté refused to sign, is allegedly still kept in a drawer somewhere at that sportswear company's headquarters. Urban legend says they frame it in their executive training room now, a reminder that not everyone can be bought. But Kanté never speaks about it. Never mentions it in interviews. If you asked him about sponsorships or money or contracts, he gives that quiet smile and changes the subject to football. Because for N'Golo Kanté, the story was never about refusing £12 million. It was about remembering the woman who cleaned offices for 23 years so her son could dream. And honoring her by never letting anyone, no matter how much money they offered, choose his character for him. The contract stayed unsigned. The pen stayed untouched. N'Golo Kanté walked out of that boardroom exactly as he'd walked in, a man who understood that real wealth isn't measured in millions, but in promises kept. 3 months later, his mother retired. Not because of the sponsorship he refused, but because of the one he chose, the smaller deal that let him stay true to who he was. She called him the day she handed in her resignation at the last office building. 23 years of night shifts ended. "You kept your promise," she told him. "I learned from the best," he replied. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The executives in that room still talk about the day N'Golo Kanté taught them that integrity isn't negotiable. That character isn't a clause you can edit. That something's matter more than any contract. The pen still sits in a drawer at that company's headquarters. A £12 million reminder that walked out the door. Because N'Golo Kanté proved what his mother taught him in that small Paris apartment all those years ago. You don't become rich by taking everything offered. You become rich by knowing what's worth keeping.